τα τελευταία 2 χρόνια από τη χώρα μας φεύγουν πολύ περισσότεροι από όσοι μπαίνουν στα σύνορά μας. Σήμερα 41 άτομα από το Αφγανιστάν θα πετάξουν με το αεροσκάφος για τη Λισαβόνα. Η ευρωπαϊκή αλληλεγγύη είναι η λύση για το μεταναστευτικό. Αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, το 2020 μαζί θεμελιώσαμε τη συστηματική συνεργασία των ΜΕΔ5, των χωρών που αντιμετωπίζουν καθημερινά τις έντονες επιπτώσεις της ευρωπαϊκής μεταναστευτικής κρίσης.
Οι μεταναστευτικές ροές έχουν μειωθεί σε σχέση με το 2019 κατά 90%. Επαναλαμβάνω, κατά 90%.
Κύριε Πρωθυπουργέ,
Dear Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, Minister, General Secretaries, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for your presence at our event today here in the cloister of the Zapion Megaron, a place of undeniable history and symbolism. Today's event, which takes place on the occasion of the 3-year anniversary of the establishment of the Ministry of Migration and Asylum and the Migration and Internal Affairs Fund 2021-2027, could be said to be an ideal opportunity to take a brief yet comprehensive look at the achievements of the last 3 years. So we will present national policy on the Migration and International Affairs Funds 2021-2027, co-funded by the European Union. I would like, therefore, without further ado, to invite Mr. Patroklos Georgiades, who will present the new funds programs. Before of that, we will see the 3 videos of the TAMEY, of the Migration and Internal Affairs Funds.
Επενδύει στην αποδοτική διαχείριση των μεταναστευτικών ροών. Εγγυάται το άσυλο και την κοινή μεταναστευτική πολιτική της Ευρώπης με σεβασμό στο διεθνές δίκαιο. Με 535 εκατομμύρια ευρώ υποστηρίζει την νόμιμη μετανάστευση και την αποτελεσματική ένταξη υπηκόων τρίτων χωρών και ενισχύει την ασφαλή επιστροφή σε τρίτες χώρες. Γιατί η ασφάλεια μας ενώνει. Ταμεία Μετανάστευσης και Εσωτερικών Υποθέσεων. Ασφάλεια για όλους. Με τη συγχρηματοδότηση της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Το μέσο χρηματοδοτικής στήριξης για τη διαχείριση των συνόρων και την πολιτική θεωρήσεων εγγυάται την ασφάλεια των συνόρων της Ελλάδας και της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης και αποσκοπεί στην ελεύθερη κυκλοφορία των προσώπων. Με 1,4 δισεκατομμύρια ευρώ στοχεύει στην αποτροπή των παράνομων διελεύσεων στα σύνορα, καθώς και στην αποτροπή της παράνομης μετανάστευσης και του διασυνοριακού εγκλήματος. Είναι η κοινή γραμμή στην έκδοση των θεωρήσεων και τη διευκόλυνση των νόμιμων ταξιδιών. Γιατί η ασφάλεια μας ενώνει. Ταμεία Μετανάστευσης και Εσωτερικών Υποθέσεων. Ασφάλεια για όλους. Με τη συγχρηματοδότηση της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Το Ταμείο Εσωτερικής Ασφάλειας συμβάλλει στο υψηλό επίπεδο ασφάλειας στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Προλαμβάνει και καταπολεμά την τρομοκρατία, το σοβαρό και οργανωμένο έγκλημα και το κυβερνοέγκλημα και παρέχει βοήθεια και προστασία στα θύματα εγκληματικών πράξεων. Με προϋπολογισμό 57 εκατομμύρια ευρώ, στοχεύει στη διευκόλυνση ανταλλαγής πληροφοριών μεταξύ των αρμόδιων αρχών και στην ενίσχυση των κοινών ενεργειών διασυνοριακής ασφάλειας. Γιατί η ασφάλεια μας ενώνει. Ταμεία Μετανάστευσης και Εσωτερικών Υποθέσεων. Ασφάλεια για όλους. Με τη συγχρηματοδότηση της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης.
Κύριε Πρόεδρε,
Dear President of the government, ministers, deputy ministers, dear colleagues, general, secretaries, dear employees of the Migration and Internal Affairs Funds, we present proudly the three funds of the new programming periods that start from January 2023. Security brings us together. This is the motto of the new programming period. Security for local societies and refugees, of course. Towards this direction, we have a responsible for human rights, who will cooperate with the committee respective for human rights. He will follow the implementation of state and European legislation in international protection award in relation to the three co-funded funds. The three funds deal with the migration issue, internal security, etc. They complement each other since they deal with different aspects of the same issue with different policies and targeting. It is important to underline that according to the data declared to the European Commission until the 15th of October 2022, the absorption per national program is calculated per se. European Integration Fund 87%, Internal Affairs Fund 76.2%. Now, while border security at 70.8%. According to provisions of payments until 2023, the absorption of funds will exceed 99% for the new period 2021-2027. We will have the European Integration Fund, Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, and Internal Security Fund. The Asylum and Migration Fund aims at contributing the management of flows, migration flows, and the enhancement of a common policy for asylum and a shared policy according to the European acquis. The fund on visas and borders will protect the borders, facilitate legal migration and prevent illegal one, and a common visa policy for facilitating internal travels. The last fund, the security one, will deal against terrorism, cyber crime, and the protection of victims of criminal acts. Since 2021, when we had the special regulation of the funds, the minister himself and his team was in constant negotiations, discussions for the handling of the funds. And following that, we had the approval of projects of 2 billion. That doesn't mean that we won't need additional funds in the future, because our priority as a country is to protect the acquis communautaire and assure proper living conditions for all migrants. This strategic choice entails fair procedures for asylum, legal assistance at second degree, information on the rights to all those in the process of asylum, fast-track procedures for legal migration, and social integration. Special provisions are there for vulnerable groups and all those who do not, who are not beneficiaries of the asylum procedures. There are special provisions for their return. Our country exceeded its budget by 3%, so we invest strategically in finding new resources. Despite the 1.4 billion, that is our budget, free communication of people and deterrence in the border for illegal migration. So this fund is designed in order to improve border control, to implement Eurosur, enhance operations, improve cooperation with Frontex, promote training and education actions on human rights, enhance the visa policy, develop the VIS in interoperability with other information systems, digitize the process of visas, and increase our coverage for visa awarding. The Internal Security Fund protects the internal security, enhances cooperation among different authorities, improves the information on drugs via Europol, creates networks of cooperation, and enhances the opportunities of combating the dark and deep web. With the 3 funds, our country will be able to tackle the migration system and internal security. We cover 30% of our total needs by 2029 with these funds. At the same time, we aim at finding new funds through these funds, through extraordinary subsidies and other funding. We need to mention here nonetheless that we have achieved increase of EU funds by 6 million euros via these funds. More specifically, 4 proposals for special actions have been approved, with more important the protection of trafficking victims and AI for protection of borders, and a proposal for empowering the Greek police. Today we start officially the new programming period. Of course, we had the meeting of the first monitoring committee in last December of 2022, where we had the first specialization of the national programs for the new programming period. There, we specialized 10 actions with regard the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund of 447 million 4 actions for the visas and border protection of 135 million euros, and 1 action for the internal security fund of 2.5 million euros. Today, after that, we will have the second meeting of the monitoring committee in order to proceed in the second specialization of our programs. As you can understand, the monitoring committee, representatives of the police, the implementation agencies in some have a lot of challenges to deal with. Of course, I am very hopeful that we will have fruitful results by all. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your attention.
Κύριε Γενικέ, σας ευχαριστούμε θερμά για την πολύ...
Dear General Secretary, thank you very much for your presentation. At this point, we will welcome Mrs. Beate Gminder, Deputy Director General of the European Commission, responsible on the Task Force on Migration Management. Who is here for the European Commission?
Dear Minister Mitaki, dear Minister Voltepsi, dear ministers, dear special secretaries, dear secretary generals, and dear colleagues. It's an honor and a pleasure to greet you here today as representative of the European Commission and in my capacity as head of Task Force Migration Management. We have been together spearheading the first memorandum of understanding on migration between the EU, its EU agencies, EUAA, Frontex, Europol, and Fundamental Rights Agency, and a member state. And you have been at the forefront of considerable progress with our and UN support in many areas, including the reduction of overcrowding and the establishment of new centers on the islands, the improvements of the reception system on the mainland, the acceleration of asylum procedures and the reduction of backlog, the improvement of protection and care for unaccompanied minors, and establishing a new monitoring mechanism for fundamental rights. You have all worked very hard to achieve this, at impossible hours and with much energy and enthusiasm. More than once, when we argued, it was because you felt we were too slow at our end. The previous generation of EU funds, from 2014 to 20, provided Greece with more than €3 billion to set the foundation for the achievements we see today. The new generation, and initially set now at 1.9 billion, is now here to provide Greece with the means to continue and build upon past efforts and to ensure that previous investments and projects are sustained. European funds are the concrete expression of solidarity, support people, protect borders, and create jobs. We have a shared responsibility to manage them in full transparency and accountability and in line with fundamental rights. We need to use these funds strategically to address the challenges we face today in reception, at the borders, and in integration, but also with a long-term outlook. In the short term, we need to work together to reduce irregular migration. The EU is very clear in its message that while being open to people fleeing conflicts and wars, economic migration should be controlled using legal and safe pathways without paying money to smugglers. But looking beyond the immediate, we need to take into account our long-term demographic trends, the reality of climate change, security, the global race for talent, and growing inequality in the world. We should harness the talent that migrants bring today, every day, to our society. The President of the Commission just announced the European Year of Skills for 2023, and we will use it in full, and I hope it can be a catalyst also at national level to pave the way for work on legal pathways and integration. Last, we need to move from ad hoc responses to structural solutions. That's why the Commission has tabled the Pact on Migration and Asylum, a European solution to rebuild trust between member states and to restore citizens' confidence in our capacity to manage migration as a union. The EU has already proven in other areas that it can take extraordinary steps to reconcile diverging perspectives. I want to thank you also on behalf of my Commissioner to take part in this collective effort and assure you of our continuous support for the next years of the journey. Thank you.
Στο σημείο αυτό,
At this point, I'd like to welcome to the floor the Minister, Notis Mitarakis, who will talk to us about all the progress during the last 3 years at the Ministry of Migration and Asylum. So, Mr. Mitarakis, the floor is yours. Dear Prime Minister, dear colleagues, the Parliament and the government, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure, I'm really moved, to welcome you here at Zapio at the 3rd anniversary of the establishment of the Ministry of Migration and Asylum. I'd like to really thank all the employees and the staff at the Ministry, all of you that helped us during the last 3 years in order to face the challenges of the migration crisis. All of you who helped us to reverse the impact of migration in the Hellenic society. Mr. President, please allow me to thank you personally for your trust in the political leadership of the ministry and all our employees. I remember your decision to establish this ministry in January of 2020 because of the high migration flows of the previous years, which have caused pressures in our islands and the mainland. I remember you told me, let's do this right, emphasizing on the need to be effective. Today, that the migration crisis is immense in other countries of the European Union, our country faces only a small impact. Ladies and gentlemen, during the first weeks of 2020, we had to deal with the impact of the high flows of the period 2015-2019, and on the other hand, the hybrid threat at Evros and our islands. The ministry immediately had to establish a structure and an organization, and we were very quick in supporting the service for reception and identification, the Appeals Committee, the International Relations Directorate, and we had technological updates and upgrades, and we also developed our staff and employees. So in difficult times, like the situations in Evros and the islands, the fire at Moria, we managed to deal with these situations properly with the guidance and support of the Prime Minister. And I remember KISEA meeting in the 1st of March of 2020, when we decided to protect our borders, our external borders, and 2.5 years before at Moria, we avoided a humanitarian crisis during the pandemic. And this crisis became an opportunity for us to upgrade the living conditions and the security conditions for the beneficiaries, our staff, and the local society. So, ladies and gentlemen, from the beginning, we had two measurable goals. The first, to reduce the flows, and second, to reduce the impact of the crisis at the local societies. After the burst of flows during 2015 to 2019, in 2020 we had less flows. The same happened in 2022. Instead of 92,000 residents in 121 establishments all around Greece, we now have 14,000 in 33 establishments. So here, with the Prime Minister being there, we delivered the establishment at Samos, Moria, at Mytilene, while Greece sees a progress. This is not the situation in Europe. Arrivals in Greece in 2022 only represent 5% of the total arrivals all around the European Union. They were 75% in 2015. We moved into 7 different actions, and we managed to have a sustainable control of the migration crisis. First, we guard our borders effectively, which are the external borders of the European Union, with the funding of the migration funds managed by the ministry. We proved that the protection of our borders is that which prevents lives to be lost in the borders, and comes along with the fundamental rights. And then we managed to digitize the asylum procedures and to discriminate between immigrants and refugees. And we also created closed establishments in Kos, Leros, and Lesvos and Chios follow, and also establishment at Evros. And this is how we can measure the amount of applicants, and creating establishments for those who are not eligible for international protection. And thus, we can organize and structure and control all these establishments in our country. Fourth, we deport all those who are not eligible for asylum, and this in the context of the obligatory returns, and we enhance our cooperation with Frontex and two-party agreements, as we did with Bangladesh. We also characterize Turkey as a country which complies with the regulations, because this is the responsibility of Turkey, and to avoid the deports from Turkey to Greece. Then we had rules for the NGOs, criteria for their registration in the NGOs register, and the last, we managed that the subsidies were not an incentive for aliens to come to Greece. We also enhance the municipalities with a huge amount for subsidies. We managed to We enhanced some islands in terms of tourism, and we implement for the first time an integration program of refugees, and we faced the issue of the unaccompanied minors. And we also opened our country to the Ukrainians who came here, and we had also an important role for the Security Council of the European Union. We focused on transparency by abolishing the legislation of Syriza and establishing framework tenders, by activating and operating properly the monitoring committee, which is also here today. The approval of migration and home affairs funds, the budget is 2.1 billion euros, and with the support of the NSRF, this amount goes up to 1.4 billion euros. The migration issue does not end, and it is at the same time a challenge and a need. Our country implements a very strict but fair migration policy, and we focus on migration with rules, with criteria based on our needs. And we, at the same time, we face all these traffickers, and we want to change the migration code because we want to attract, when needed, staff at the primary sector or more specialized staff of high specialization, such as telecommunications and the information technology, and also investors who understand the perspective of the Greek economy. We have successful projects, and I would like to mention the transfer of software house, which is a multinational company to Thessaloniki, from Russia to Thessaloniki. All the staff have moved and work in Thessaloniki. And we managed to issue all the necessary visa with the fast-track procedures in order to be competitive against other European countries who also wanted to achieve this investment. We also have two-party agreements with other countries because we want to enhance the returns of those who have illegally entered our country. And we have a new residence permit, a temporary residence permit of 9 months per year and up to 5 years. At the same time, we want to face the illegal migration, and we come first at the European Union. We had the initiative Med5 in Athens, along with other countries, which is now an institution in an organized and structured way. And we want to establish measures of solidarity and to create a common European space of protection that will allow the free movement within the European countries of all recognized refugees, as was the case in the case of Ukraine. Along with Austria and Poland in Vilnius, 16 member states, we repeated the necessity of protecting our external borders and to create artificial obstacles in our external borders. We will have 27 Ministry of Internal Affairs at the second meeting in Athens. So we must make difficult but effective decisions at the European level. The Commission, the Council. So Greece is ready for the future. Our geographical position, along with external threats, do not leave us any space to relax. We are the border of the European Union and we have the obligation to guard it. We are ready for this. We are ready for every challenge that may arise when it comes to the migration issue. We have the structures, the infrastructure, we have the know-how, we have the staff, we have a plan, and we are determined to make it. Thank you.
Σας ευχαριστώ.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, whom it is an honor to accommodate here with us today. Minister, dear Minister, Deputy Minister, Assistant Minister, Deputy Ministers, Secretary Generals, Secretaries, dear friends, executives of the Hellenic Police, Port Police, 3.5 years of governors. There are a lot of fields that show that Greece has turned page. But among the first, we can include the migration issue because everything has changed there. The administrative chaos which prevailed until summer 2019 was succeeded by the Ministry of Migration and Asylum, and I remember well the decision we took back then to introduce this ministry. And I believe that the work presented by the Minister and the Secretary General is a proof of a right choice. But besides the operation of the ministry, we protected the borders at Evros, those that did not exist. Now we have also in the Aegean, where the bad cases of Moria and other cases were replaced by modern camps and shelters. So we are more ready than ever. In March 2020, the ministry spoke at Kisea when we took the decision to protect our borders and use all means available in order to prevent this weaponization of people that tried to enter our borders. It was a bomb back then. We dealt with decisively with the cooperation of the border population. I would like to underline the importance of those hours, the formal and on the spot identification of our borders as the eastern borders, external borders of Europe, and 48 hours after this deterrence, we had in the European institutions visiting the borders, the heads of the Commission, of the Council, and Daviza Soli, the President of the European Parliament, the late one. And after this effective defense we followed with an important work, obvious on the data and the quality of life of border areas. Last year, we had 17,000 migrants coming to our country. In 2015, more than 900,000. In 2015, 75% of the illegal migrations of the EU came through Greece. Last year, it was only 5%. At the same time, we prevented around 200,000 illegal trespassing and more or less the same in our sea borders. And even our islands felt the difference, because in 2019 we had only 40,000 migrants. Today we just have 5,000. And of course now only 15,000 migrants are in closed facilities, controlled ones, and those facilities keep decreasing. 121 were in 2019, 33 are just today, and the respective facilities now are given back to the municipalities. And we have also apartments rented for migrants, and those will continue to be offered to our vulnerable fellow citizens of ours after the end of their task. And of course, the 5 islands that have been affected by these migration flows have been dealt with in a positive way. We decreased the VIT in these islands, and we try to financially support the municipalities of those islands in order to improve the infrastructure. And as migrants decrease, these infrastructures are offered to the public. 15,000 people have been relocated or returned voluntarily to their countries. And from the 200,000 pending asylum applications we inherited in 2019, today we have less than 20,000, and congratulations to all services of the Ministry of Migration and Asylum that simplified the procedure and found a solution to these pending issues, difficult pending issue. What do the above prove, ladies and gentlemen? First, that Greece is a lead actor using a method and being bold in the effective management of the challenges of migration. We protect our eastern, national and European borders against illegal flows and traffickers of lives. That is why now we extend the fence at Evros, trying to reinforce our deterrence forces, but we also protect the dignity of all those who do come to Greece with proper shelter. And make the comparison between the present and the camp of Samos in the past. The new structure, the new shelter, the new camp is more modern and co-financed by various resources. We focus on the dignity of people. Our port authorities have saved thousands of people whom otherwise might have lost their lives in the Aegean. There where they were sent by traffickers, And the minister is right to say that strict but fair protection of borders is a means of deterrence. The less people are found in the sea, the less people will lose their lives. I want to mention another problem we inherited from the inverted commas progressive government of 2015-2009, and that is the issue of unaccompanied minors. We introduced a special secretary for dealing with this issue with Mrs. Agapidaki, the support of the Prime Minister and the Deputy Minister, Mrs. Vultepsi. We solved this issue. More than 1,500 minors have been transferred to other countries, and a lot of them have been reunited with their families. All those who chose to stay here are trained and educated, and when they become 18, they need to have the opportunity, having 3-year education, to be able to stay in our country and be integrated in Greek society. The third conclusion is that in this policy we followed, which is fair and at the same time strict, of course we don't need labels and origin, countries of origin. When we were attacked by Turkey, we raised our hands and we said we will host vulnerable women from Afghanistan. 1,000 women came to Greece, the most in Europe after Taliban took over government. And of course we hosted victims of the Russian invasion. We had the biggest camping program in Europe. We received 600 people, children mostly, in our country. We hosted them in summer camps. They came here disappointed and left our country with a smile on their face. And we have above all, this European cooperation. We are the lead actors in this effort, but we cannot be alone. The decisions need to be taken at European level. A lot have been done, but a lot more need to be done. We do have cooperation with Cyprus, Spain, Italy, Malta, and of course I need to remind you the Vilnius Agreement about the safe protection of our border. And at a period of instability, the migration issue is at stake. New initiatives are demanded. So European solidarity and readiness should be stable, especially for the hosting country. And I would like to congratulate the Ministry for their cooperation with the European Commission. The funds allocated via this umbrella of funds are huge, and this dimension is quite important. It is quite important to promote the geopolitical dimension of the problem, because our eastern neighbors weaponize human pain. To the decisions of European Union are weakened, were not implemented. Ankara needs to implement what has agreed according to the agreement signed by EU and Turkey in 2016. Sometimes they try their best, some other times they don't, but there is always ground for improvement in order to tackle the migration problem. We need to cooperate in order to facilitate the migrants and those who want to move from one European country to another. These 3 years of since the founding of the ministry, we did not protect only our country and Europe, but we also protected the migrants, victims of traffickers, and it's high time we saw responsibly other aspects of the problem, as the action of some few NGOs that do not live up to the expectation. The registry we introduced, 81 agencies were approved, but others were rejected. And of course, we need to make a distinction between illegal economic migrants and refugees that need asylum. We need to understand all this. It is something we saw recently when we saw some news about allegedly victims of the Greek state, but that was a propaganda about a young girl that lost her life after bitten by a scorpio. But even though some international news agencies accepted their wrong, unfortunately in our country some others choose to reproduce this fake news. These fake news are exported as true news abroad, and then they are reintroduced to our country as arguments. Nonetheless, Greece today is not the eastern border of Europe. It is a creative hive of integration for all those who want to continue their lives in our country. 42,000 migrants have attended educational and training programs. 15,000 that have learned our language can be part of training in order to find job in their new country. We are at a state that our primary sector, construction and tourism, need employees, a lot of state-of-the-art companies. And for the first, we have cooperations with third countries in order to do what we need. Organized migration towards the EU for state-of-the-art companies. We see the transfer of a Deutsche Com data center from St. Petersburg and Antalya to Thessaloniki. So, before I rest my case, I would like to congratulate all those achievers. The minister had told me when I talked to him about this ministry that a lot would bet that he wouldn't be there more than a month, because I want to remind you the pressure we received back in February 2019. Yet we managed to tackle things. The stress of migration became a medal for us, and I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart all the representatives of the police, the army, the port police, who 24/7, 365 are there to protect our borders and facilitate vulnerable people. Thank you all for protecting our borders. And of course, we must not forget all those who are in the difficult borders of Evros. And I would like also to thank those who embrace migrants, who will deal with their problems respecting their dignity. In the ministry, I want to congratulate all the executives and staff, and I believe more than 2 billion euros through the funds of migration and internal affairs is a recognition by the Commission that here we have a reliable partner that can transparently and effectively manage these European funds. We have made a lot, we have done a lot. But if there is a sector we can talk for sure and say we said it, we did it, this is the migration sector. And this is the path that we will follow in the future as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Σας ευχαριστούμε θερμά.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point we'll have a break. Then there will be the second meeting of the monitoring committee. Thank you. We would like to welcome you to this second meeting of the monitoring committee for the Asylum and Home Affairs funds. Dear Minister and Deputy Minister, thank you for being here today. So we have arranged for 3 things today. Apart from the third, which are the issues of the committee which will be presented to you for your approval, we have the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Migration Asylum, Mrs. Vultepsi. As you have may noticed in the previous event for the anniversary of the 3rd years of our ministry, our priority after the completion of the previous issues is social integration and unaccompanied minors. This is what the Prime Minister also stated himself for the next government period. Mrs. Vultepsi is in charge of this issue, and we asked her to come here today and present this topic of social inclusion, social integration. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for being here today with us And I'll start by saying that we combined this event for the anniversary of the 3 years of the establishment of this Ministry of Migration and Asylum with the presentation of the Migration and Internal Affairs Funds of the European Commission for the new programming period 2020 to 2027. As I had the opportunity many times to state within the country and outside the country that we have a European paradox here since we are already in 2023. However, dear Beate, let's see the good side of things. We had the opportunity in Greece to prove one more time that we can deal with the crisis based on our own potential. And all these years, even though funding was difficult, we managed to implement the strategy structured by Mr. Mitsotakis, which is the simultaneous protection of the borders and the humans. So the goal has been achieved thanks to the organized efforts of more than one ministries, and we can now talk about the effective protection of our borders, which go under great pressure due to Turkey and the weaponization of the people. So, and as we have also said within the country and outside the country, in Greece, we cannot talk in general about migration flows. Yes, they existed, they do exist, and they will exist. In Greece, we are facing a very special condition because a revising force uses the migration issue as part of its toolkit, and nevertheless, we managed to implement the policy of simultaneous protection of borders and humans, and we made it. And that's not a matter of luck. In 2020, when we had the transpassing of our borders in Evros, we established the General Secretary of Unaccompanied Minors with initiative of the Prime Minister, and it's indeed very successful. We determined where children under difficult conditions were living, their relocation to other European countries, and the creation of the mechanism for urgent response, which has saved many children. And we're also celebrating the 3 years from the establishment of this General Secretary. And I'd like to thank for this inspired and creative contribution the first Secretary, Mrs. Irini Agapidaki, who established and organized this General Secretary from scratch, put the boundaries, the foundations, and we now have the opportunity to expand our ideas under Mr. Iraklis Moskov, who I thank personally. 1 year later, in January of 2021, we had a deputy minister in our ministry for the unaccompanied minors, and I had the honor to be assigned to this position, and with the contribution of the General Secretary, Mr. Moskov, and the General Secretaries of the Ministry, Patroklos Georgiadis and Manos Logothetis, the Special Secretary of Involved Parties, Vangelis Konstantinou, and the Operational Secretaries, Mrs. Fotini Koulouri, until recently, and Rania Stavropoulou, who succeeded in this role. Everything we achieve, and I repeat that again and again, is the result of teamwork, and I believe in teamwork. Given the fact that the immigration issue has many aspects, and the work of one person affects the work of the others, and we need to work together in this issue. So we are now talking about inclusion and about inclusion policies. Even though until now, there was no sufficient European funding, and many times we had to invent solutions and to look for the Greek funding, and we want to thank the Ministry of Finance for that, an effort that was supported by the international organizations, the International Organization for Migrants, the DG Home, the United Nations, our partners, the NGOs, and despite all this, and with the contribution of all of them, we managed to keep our inclusion programs alive and create new ones. In the meantime, we also had the refugee crisis from Ukraine, so we indeed had to join forces in order to handle all this challenge that was created by the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. But we had with us the Greek strategy for inclusion that puts the foundations for the procedure we have established. And we're talking about real social inclusion, not about ghettos, marginalization, and criminality with a severe impact on the public. Until today, we have made use of the funding provided by the European Union in full, and we're having a system that, with this new financing program, will help us get results in terms of inclusion. And we're now seeing the use of using together different tools that are combined to work supplementary and help us succeed and be even more effective for the goal of the inclusion. In the framework of this new programming period 2021-2027, the Ministry of Migration and Asylum, through the Social Inclusion Directorate, has already submitted from April 2021 proposals for inclusion to European funds, TAMEY, which are the main funding resources for the social inclusion policy. We're talking about more than 300 million euros, which are distributed in 23 actions, depending on the eligibility of the previous mentioned financing resources and the conditions that exist in this new financing regulation of the funds, especially when it comes to TAMEY. Integration. We're talking about the pre-integration and the alignment with the new strategy of 2021 and the new action plan of the European Commission, which focuses on the timely actions, the early action. For third country citizens, social inclusion policy μέσω των κανόνων δικαίου και των νομοθετημάτων. Is being made through the through regulations and laws and our national strategy. Εκεί εκπονείται από το Υπουργείο Μετανάστευσης και Ασύλου και εφαρμόζεται με.
This is our policy implemented in cooperation of services at the local, national and regional level. The inclusion policy that is under the respective deputy minister will follow the implementation and implementation of social integration and cooperation with ministries, international cooperation, civil society, etc. I will mention a few actions implemented after 2019 or are underway. In reality, most of actions have been planned, designed, and we look forward to the EU funding. We have the new strategy of social inclusion published since November 2021. It has to do with the inclusion of asylum seekers, and we have a pre-inclusion process for those with a migration profile. We have 4 sections. We have pre-inclusion of asylum seekers. This includes protection of rights and promotion of the European lifestyle and rule of law, and effective protection from any form of violence, social inclusions of beneficiaries of those that are part of work projects and inclusion, and a third pillar against any kind of protection against any kind of violence, abuse, etc. And of course, we have the monitoring of inclusion course. Our inclusion program is Ilios program. It supports the beneficiaries of international protection from hosting to inclusion. It is implemented by IOM and financed by our ministry. This program, beyond the beneficiaries of international protection, Ukrainian beneficiaries with protection status awarded to them. The Social Inclusion Directorate is responsible for implementing this via inclusion courses, Greek language courses, housing, skills with circles of different courses, access to labor market where we have one-to-one sessions and professional guidance, and awareness of local societies. At this phase, the program is implemented through the funding of the ministry and the program of public investments, and in cooperation with the special service of the European Social Funds. A second action has to do with the integration in labor market. Greece uses this very moment funds from the recovery fund. It is the only country doing so for the integration of migrants. The aim of the program is to train and educate refugees and legal migrants in critical parts of Greek economy, like the agricultural sector, manufacturing, tourism, etc. This action will last for 3 years. It will cost 36 million euros and can offer its services up to 18,000 beneficiaries. The sub-projects are linked to 8 different sectors. I already mentioned the 4th more important ones. Of course, it includes protection of the environment and protection against all forms of violence, and all these are included, and we have the professional profile of the beneficiaries recorded. It was difficult and we consumed a lot of man hours, and in that we have Nasos Dizenzato, Dr. Kalliopi Saini, and all those who work in Social Inclusion Directorate and in my office. We are getting ready for the next emblematic action. which is the inclusion of former unaccompanied minors in Greece. Helios Jr., the Prime Minister talked about the unaccompanied minors that now become adults. We called it Helios Jr., which will be financed by the Asylum, Migration, Integration Funds, and it has to do with children above 18 years old. Another action has to do the inclusion of children or the integration of children via sports. We have a good cooperation with the Olympic Committee and the faculties of various universities focusing on sports. The students and professors of sports faculties are in contact with the migrants, and 700 children have been benefited by 2021 from this action. We have social inclusion of third country nationals. We have a memorandum with UNICEF and we already implemented under the name All Children Need an Education, and it is a bridge between informal and formal education, that is transition of children in public schools. Another memorandum of cooperation we have signed is that between the IOM and our ministry. It has to do with the autonomous living of recognized refugees in Greece, and we have agreed to coordinate our actions in the framework of possible, but we manage things, we make ends meet with Mr. Vikos, and that actually in that way we try to solve overlappings of various ministries. We have a very good cooperation with the High Commissioner for Refugees, trying to have educational programs, and we have a good cooperation with Maria Clara Martin, and we have mapped the skills of refugees. It is something that we will take advantage of. We have cooperation memoranda with Greek universities, the Kapodistrian University, for an educational program for the familiarization of the European way of living and European values, and familiarization with gender equality, which is quite important for us, and prevention and protections from
Κουράσω ότι έχουμε πάρει 2 τεχνικές βοήθειες από την Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή
from violence at home. And we had we would like to thank you for your assistance, and we are happy that we have managed to get this assistance from you, especially the DESA programs from the Ukrainians. And in all these initiatives, OA plays an important role. For the first time in this organization, we have included personnel for the support of our programs in the pre-inclusion. We have exercises and trainings for prevention of natural disasters and trafficking, with participation of embassies, international organizations. In our exercise in Samos was attended by 6,000 people from various countries, and we are proud for our Medusa exercise 2022, where more than 800 people participated in 22 different locations from various countries. Dear friends, before I rest my case, I would like to thank Commissioner Beate Oake and Mrs. Gregory, Gianluca Rocco, the High Commissioner, and Maria Clara Martin, UNICEF, and Luciano Colestini, and all our colleagues, the secretaries of our ministry, the heads and executives of our ministries and services, and of course my friend Minister Notis Mitarakis. I think that the future will be more exciting and less problematic. Thank you, Sofia, for your passion, decisiveness, and the results you have brought.
Would like to thank the Deputy Minister, Mrs. Vultipsi, for everything that presented and for the future of the new program, the specialization of the new program 2021-2027, which will actually be 2023-2029. As you may have heard, we have a committee for human rights in our ministry. In charge of this committee is Mr. Solkidis, the person who will run all these issues. And today we have the honor to have the head of the Office for Fundamental Rights of Frontex, Mr. Jonas Grimkenden. Thank you very much for being here today. And I'd like to ask him to explain something that has to do with the monitoring committee about the new challenges that we will face in the new programmatic period when it comes to compliance, our compliance, in terms of fundamental human rights. Mr. Grimkeden, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ministers, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here, and I will be speaking in English, and I apologize for that and thank the interpreters for the good service. Article 39 of the Common Provisions Regulation says that in the funds, EU agencies can cooperate, so I guess to some extent we can already tick that box that I'm here. I'm very happy. Also, colleagues, including the Executive Director, are here. So we're already cooperating, and I'm very happy about that. If that's not the reason why I'm here, I'm still very happy to be here. I would like to speak about three things: funds, fundamental rights, and Frontex. And I will start with fundamental rights. So why fundamental rights are important in border management is obvious, I think, but let me repeat what I think is at the forefront. Border management needs to provide for secure border, and secure border very much hinges on providing a mechanism for persons in need of protection. Border management needs to provide modern and professional services that can enjoy the trust of travelers, migrants, and society at large. Border management needs to provide a service that is complying, obviously, with national, EU, and international law. Border management and fundamental rights are also important given the sensitivity of the context that we're talking about. Some of you remember maybe even the Single European Act 35 years ago that created the internal market and removed the internal borders, which created effectively the shared external borders of the European Union, shared between the EU member states and the EU itself. So with this, apart from legal obligations, EU's external borders are a responsibility for all of us, and the reputation of the borders affect all of us. That's what I wanted to say about fundamental rights. I will come back a little bit more to specifics in the context of funds, but I'm moving to Frontex. 20 months ago or so, I started my task at the agency in Warsaw. And that's a position that is based on the 2019 regulation that gives me significant amounts of independence and resources. And I'm saying this not to boost my own importance, on the contrary, and I'll come back to that. I want to underline the importance that the EU and its member states have placed on fundamental rights in border management, and I will give you a few more examples. The regulation, so the European Border and Coast Guard Regulation, speaks about that fundamental rights, quote, shall be overarching components in the implementation of European integrated border management. So Article 3, the first substantive provision of Frontex regulation. And importantly, the regulation is explicit on that fundamental rights obligations are not for Frontex only, but also for the member states, referring and referencing EU primary law, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, as well as international law. And actually, I like to say, I'm pretty sure that the regulation that runs, or under which the European Border and Coast Guard operates, is a unique EU instrument in terms of how many times it mentions fundamental rights. So the Common Provisions Regulation that we're dealing with here mentions fundamental rights 10 times. And if I would ask you to guess how many times the Frontex regulation mentions fundamental rights, I think you would all be amiss. So it's more than 200 times. So of course it's not a random inclusion of fundamental rights references, it's intentional. And you will be pleased to know that I'm on page 2 of 2.5, so I'm getting there. The Management Board of Frontex also adopted a very good strategy and an action plan on fundamental rights not so long ago, a year or two ago, that is applicable to the agency, but also to the member states and Schengen-associated countries. In addition to numerous actions for the agency itself, it also includes, importantly, 10 objectives for the member states. 10 objectives and 27 specific actions, and I will quote a couple of them for you. It should ensure that the fundamental rights compliance of its operational activities is regularly and independently evaluated. And another one is to implement and monitor tailored and context-specific objectives and activities through their respective national integrated border management strategies. So these are in the action plan of Frontex, where the member states, the members of the Management Board, commit to undertake these actions. Moving then to the third part of my intervention, funds. The Common Provisions Regulation that I referred to in the very beginning provides, I think, an excellent tool to ensure that fundamental rights are at the needed core of the work that you will do in the committee and in the way that the disbursement of EU funds is used. Article 15 and the reference to Annex 3 talks about horizontal enabling conditions, and you will hear more about this from the Commission later on, I am sure, but this is about ex ante rather than ex post obligations, so very important at the outset of the funds. So for that reason, I'm also very happy to be here today and mention a few things in this direction. There are two main horizontal enabling conditions, in my view. One is the compliance with the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, and as you know, since 2009, that's EU primary law, binding as treaty law. And it includes 50 provisions, 50 provisions, spanning civil and political rights to economic, social rights, and a very advanced legal text, very detailed. The regulation in this context also requires there to be a reporting arrangement to the committee on cases of non-compliance regarding the Charter. And very similarly, the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is EU law or adopted, accepted by, confirmed by the European Union since 10 years back. In relation to this convention, the UN Convention, it refers to objectives, measurable goals, and data, as well as monitoring, and arrangements to ensure that policies, legislation, and standards are reflected in the preparations and implementation of the program. And also here, there's a requirement to have some kind of arrangement for non-compliance, and I was happy to hear the Secretary General mentioning the Human Rights, Fundamental Rights Committee that has been set up in the Ministry. But also, interestingly, there should be, in relation to rights of persons with disability, a clear complaints mechanism, as well as, in general, for the funds in Article 69(7). So, I would like to conclude with a couple of concrete suggestions, examples, but to summarize what I've said so far, I've talked about the importance of fundamental rights in border management. I've talked about the strong links between fundamental rights and the work of Frontex, and border management, of course. and that fundamental rights and international human rights law dimensions are very strong common provisions in the regulation. So let me conclude with two clusters of key points. So the first one, given that funds must be managed, monitored and measured with focus on fundamental rights, and then I have three subsets here. There should be links between the work of the European Integrated Border Management, Frontex activities and EU funds to ensure coherence and effectiveness. Secondly, identified shortcomings by national monitoring mechanisms, Human Rights Commission, Ombudsman, or your own recently established Fundamental Rights Officer or the Fundamental Rights Committee, but maybe also my office. Things that we identify should be taken into consideration in the assessment of the disbursement of the funds, in the design of the funds even. But also use advice possibly from other fundamental rights officers existing in the European Union Agency for Asylum, as well as Europol, or at least very soon. And in this context, thirdly, I would like to commend the initiative of Greece with a range of procedural steps that I've seen that contributes and must contribute to resolving the serious incidents that we see, the serious issues that we see happening at Greek borders. And one of these steps is indeed the appointment of the Greek Fundamental Rights Officer. Second cluster, and I'm getting very close to the finish, the important role of national monitoring mechanism. And I think this is essential. And it's a very good progress from the previous funding cycle where only equality bodies were involved. Now it's also full-fledged, wider mandated national human rights institutions. And I think it's important also to ensure that bodies like that are able, capacity-wise, funding-wise, to engage. And I know that the Commission, if I can make advertisement for the European Commission's funding, which has a deadline on the 16th of March, there is a possibility for national human rights institutions, for instance, to team up with one or two or more member states and provide useful work on fundamental rights in a border context. And I think especially in the context of this Frontex strategy, so the strategy that I referred to before. So I would hope that the Greek independent authorities look at this opportunity and create something creative. Also, I would like to mention the draft screening regulation with a possible monitoring mechanism that should also be kept in mind. And a monitoring committee which involves national human rights and ombuds institutions is indeed a strong asset. A fundamental rights agency, another EU agency, they issued a report in 2020, and at the time I was working there, we checked with the national human rights institutions involved, and only Croatia had more extensive involvement at that point in 2020. And one important feature from that set of interviews that we did with all the national human rights institutions was that Croatia had provided training to the committee members and provided input in a very concrete way when it came to the overall human rights, fundamental rights framework. So maybe that's also something for the Commission in this context. And I think also it is important to have some form of early warning for pending complaints and pending issues, so that when issues are identified, they have a direct impact on the implementation of the funds. So coming to a close, so I've spoken about the importance of links between funds and founding values of our common frontiers, a connection that creates much needed leverage to resolve the many issues and deliver on the legal obligations. And such mechanisms also allow to resolve issues upstream and prevent violations from happening through corrective and mitigating measures. And very finally, I would like to stress that this is not an issue for me or for Mr. Solkidis. It's an issue for all of us. It's an issue for the committee, it's an issue for Greece, for the European Union, and for Frontex. And with that, I close. Thank you.
Σε ευχαριστούμε, Γιώνας.
Jonas, thank you very much for your presentation. And we proceed. We will have Mr. Papadopoulos' presentation, who is the head of the managing authority, Mrs. Vokotoudi, head of the General Directorate, and Mrs. Volfova from Brussels, the European Commission. And last, Mr. Prianos from the intermediary institution, IDEAP. Mr. Papadopoulos will talk about the implementation of the funds for 2021-2027, the new control system, and the negotiations with the involved partners, and the specialization of the programs and the schedule, the time schedule for the programmed invitations. The communication strategy of the funds for this year. The implementation of the necessary conditions of paragraph 2 of Article 2 of the ministerial decision already published in the National Gazette, and on the measures of the managing authority for the implementation of the programs. Mr. Papadopoulos, you may begin. Thank you. I'd like to see my screen. Okay. I'd like to welcome you to this event today. It's a great moment for a managing committee to be able to announce the initiation of a programming period that managed to have results and have this opportunity in such a location such as Zapio. Before I begin, I'd like to say a few things about the first topic I'm going to talk about. First, as far as the implementation of the programs is concerned, as the General Secretary already said, and it's a great need to have the activation of the migration funds and internal affairs funds for the country. And as we already mentioned in previous programming periods, we're talking about these funds since 2021, and they were approved in November 2022. I'd like to remind you that the regulation says that in 3 months we must have the convention of the committee. We are already at the second meeting without having 3 months passed. So this means that we're working hard, not only in order to approve the funds, but also to proceed with the implementation, because it is very important for all the policy sectors. The necessary conditions, which is one of the topics of my presentation, which must be implemented throughout the programming period, are 3. The compliance with the regulations of the rules of public tenders, the compliance with fundamental rights, and of course the respect to the issues of persons with disabilities. So we had a positive assessment because what our country has foreseen for all 3 conditions are considered by the European Commission as fulfilled. This is the role of this committee to observe and monitor this progress during the programming period. As a managing authority, I want to say that we have had no complaints for the violation of these conditions, these terms. But of course, we have a full programming period ahead. But we believe it will be very smooth, and we will have all the necessary tools to fulfill and monitor all these conditions. The next. Some technical issues with the presentation. So the next topic the funds, very briefly. We're talking about 3 funds, which are the Migration and Internal Affairs funds with a budget of 2 billion euros. The biggest part of which is at the Border Management Fund and the Asylum, Migration, Integration Fund, and you can see that the biggest part is about community cooperation, and the smaller part is the national resources. Another topic is the new management and control system and our progress in terms of negotiations.
Με τους φορείς που αποτελούν το σύστημα και τους δικαιούχους.
It's the obligation of our authority to go into consultation with the partners, and we want to create a management and control system that can handle all these challenges and requirements of the migration issue. And we decided to have an open dialogue with we started with the public sector institutions, and we have sent open calls to everybody. And we already have received some proposals, and we're elaborating on them, and we are looking into them, and we will have the results in about 2 or 3 weeks. And now we also have the consultation with national organizations, national agencies. We expect for their opinions by the end of January, and we will take them into account. So our goal is to have a control and managing system that will use as a base the previous system, and while upgrading and resolving any issues and any problems of the previous system, taking into consideration the opinions of all institutions. As far as the specialization is concerned, this is a requirement of the new NSRF law. Part of the law concerns our funds, and it has to do with the way in which the program will be implemented in terms of in time, actually. So it's a decision that is made by the monitoring authority, which is announced and presented in this committee, and the committee can give its opinion. And it has to do with the priorities set by the monitoring authority for the next period, and this can change at any moment. So now you will see the second specialization, which is integrated in the first. So we're talking about one decision. There are many actions that we will approve, actions to cover the needs of all services, divided by fund and goal. The first is the Common European Fund for Asylum, and we approve the main actions of this Asylum Service. We're talking about interpretation, legal support. For the Reception and Identification Service, we have the ESTIA, which has already closed the need for interpretation, facility management, sanitation for the shelters within the country, and the cash program. Movement of third-party citizens, healthcare services, temporary staff in order to cover all these needs, and actions for vulnerable groups, housing programs for vulnerable groups, which will have the name Styrixis, which means support. And this will be an open invitation announced by the managing authority for the civil society to give their proposals. We have a special action already approved for training seminars by the International Immigration Agency, and Philos program, which is already up and running and is about to be completed. It's the continuation of Hippocrates program for health. For legal immigration, we have actions for the Migration Asylum Authority, 58 centers operating as one-stop shops. For unaccompanied minors, who are our main priority, there is the guardianship, the shelters for unaccompanied minors, and semi-autonomous living. For social inclusion, we already, the Deputy Minister already talked about that. And a special action that has already been approved by the European Commission, the National Center of Solidarity for Human Trafficking. For the return into the country, we have the voluntary returns that will begin as a continuation of the program of the previous programming period. It was a successful program, and actions for the intermediary institution, IDEAP, for the operation of PK, and services and a monitoring system that will be established for the obligatory returns. For BMVI, we have already approved all the actions that we have designed, and we have integrated them in the programs. The support to for the operation of the business means, vessels, enhancing of the capacity, multi-use vessels, helicopters. You can see all that. I'm not going to get into details for that. For the
θαλάσσιων συνόρων, μη επανδρομένα σκάφη και άλλες πολύ ενδιαφέρουσες.
For the Ministry of Defense, there are also interesting actions that will enhance the defense of the borders. For Foreign Affairs Ministry, we have IT systems, ETIAS, VIS, that will be funded in this programming period, and we will be able to fulfill many requirements of the regulations. There is a reaction, which we have already announced. It's a special action for AI, for the monitoring of the borders, and actions for the reception and identification agency, for the certification in the procedure of the borders, facilities, interpretation, etc., that are covered by BMVI. Actions for the Hellenic police that will be managed by IDEAP, the intermediary institution. I think IDEAP will discuss them further. It's about all the needs of the Hellenic police for guarding the borders, staff, vehicles, even vessels for the ports at the borders of Evros. I'm not going to get into details. The actions are indeed numerous. And the last action included in the first goal of BMVI about the cybersecurity infrastructure for IT systems. The second goal, which is the common visa policy, we have all the actions that have been proposed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, actions about field workers, IT systems, security officials in embassies, digitization of files. All these actions are necessary because they will fulfill the requirements of the European regulations. The third fund, which is the Internal Security Fund, will manage almost, which will be managed almost in total by the intermediate body. It has to do with exchange of information, inter-border cooperation, and fighting criminality. The port authorities have already proposed an action for protective equipment. And I think this will be the only action that will be related to the Coast Guard in the Internal Security Fund. And I think EDIAP will go into further details on that. During this programming period, our service has decided to have a more focused strategy on how it deals with the presentation of the funding by the European Union, which is our obligation. We have already had a study on which are the strong and the weak points of the migration issue in the internal affairs. I'm not going to get into details because we have already said a few things about that in today's speeches. We have many strong points and a few weak points that have to do with its geopolitical position and external factors. The opportunity of our funds is very important because it can respond to all the needs that may exist, and for the continuation of the good practices of the previous period. So it's very important for us to include all these things in a communication strategy on how funds can respond to this situation. So this is the response to this policy, that there is a strict but fair policy, migration policy, that has to do with the effective protection of the borders, which are also the borders of Europe. We emphasize on the legal migration, as the funds regulations also state. We want to help the vulnerable groups and to help them in their inclusion and integration within a European framework of values and with an emphasis to the European policy for asylum. Our goals are, first of all, we must structure these funds as a brand for the public, to have this common identity, because as the president of the monitoring committee said, they are supplementary, they work supplementarily one to the other. They're not three separate funds. There is an interoperability among them. And we must also have the European, we must see migration at the European level. And a few things about the new logo of our funds. It's the shield for the protection and the security, which are the goals of the funds. The three lines that refer to Greece and the three funds, and the declaration that is security for the third country nationals, the local society, security for Europe, for everybody. This is our first ad campaign already on posters. You can see it around us today. Our new optical identity. And the brochures, the communication brochures, you have already been delivered them. You have them in hands. And there will also be a communication guide that will explain all the requirements for the beneficiaries in order to promote the funding from these funds. So this event today is part of the communication actions of this new period. As it was announced, there will be a second European conference on border management. This is something we're still planning, and it has not been completed. The managing authority will participate in Thessaloniki International Exhibition. And to conclude, I'd like to say that the new programming period starts for us with an effort to help and be helped all together. So it's very important. It's a prerequisite for the managing authority to report on the measures it takes for effective management. And we would like to announce today that we have already tried to. Our main problem is that we wanted to hear the beneficiaries talking about their problems. This is why we had all these open conversations for designing the programs and for the managing and control system. And we want to have such conversations within this committee in this programming period. And this only indicatively. The previous week, we signed the framework contract for a technical counselor, which is a big innovation for our funds, because we have now the opportunity to provide technical support apart from us to the intermediate bodies and the implementation bodies. This is very important because in cases of beneficiaries who face any bureaucratic issue and cannot deal with any issue related to the control and management system. So we signed this contract. It has a duration of 4 years. It's a great success for us, and we will be able to assist the implementation bodies in this way as well. And last thing, in the previous week, the National Center for Public Administration approved 2 training programs, which we have been negotiating with EGDA and have to do with the managing and control system from the part of the beneficiary. So the beneficiary public bodies will be trained on the managing and control system. It's 4 rounds of seminars and 1 round of seminar for the officials of the managing authority and the intermediate bodies in terms of the managing and control system. This is something that we agreed with the National Authority for Public Administration, and the 5 first seminars will take place this year. That's all for me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Papadopoulos.
And now we will give the floor to the General Director, Mrs. Foukoutuzi, Florentia Foukoutuzi. She will present the methodology and evaluation criteria of the actions according to paragraph 3 of Article 2 of the political decision of 979 of 2003, published in the official gazette. Mrs. Foukoutuzi. Good morning, everyone. Good luck with the new programming period. We are in the second meeting right now. Despite the fact that most of you have worked with a national program, it's important to talk about the evaluation or assessment criteria and how we will approve all actions. A reason why this is important is because we had all this funding from the European Commission already mentioned, and we have thanked the Commission for that, and I will do the same, but since this funding came with a different methodology, the Commission had a different regulatory framework from ours. So we had other funding resources not linked to the national program that led the different bodies to misunderstand something. So we need to remember how the national program works. I need to remind you, nonetheless, that we must not confuse the eligibility rules with the implementation way in the framework of funding and the legal framework applicable to all services and other bodies financed, because if they financed by public money, they need to follow the same procedure. That we have a framework guiding the program, that doesn't mean that they should not respect the national accounting standards. The assessment way is comparative or direct assessment. After this meeting, that means we will have selected the calls that will be published, and these in these one can participate by direct assessment. In simple words, we have a date for submission of proposals and an end date or an open call. And different bodies can submit as long as this call lasts their proposal, and they should not wait until everybody submits. So we can have a gradual assessment as proposals are submitted. So we have a direct way of assessing, but it is indicative for bodies that are exclusively responsible for the implementation of this action. Because if we have different bodies involved, we saw that in the past the budget was exhausted and a lot of proposals, even though they were good, could not be funded. So the different bodies got stressed. So different bodies can ask for the same money. And in this we choose comparative assessment. It takes more time, but it can help us have an optimum proposal in order for the authority to be able to start implementing it. In this case, we need to have a specific timetable for the submission of proposals. From the proposals I sent you last night, we will have 127 calls in total, and we will have more added. 126 of them will be assessed directly, and only one will have a comparative assessment that has to do with a STIA, limited position, with extremely vulnerable people with health issues. That will be a call open to all bodies that have the administrative ability to run something like that. So that will have, and hopefully they will show a lot of interest. Then we will have calls for unaccompanied minors, mostly. We will have comparative assessment. and we will have another program for care within the closed facilities. There is a time table until we have this assessment and the funding. From the figure, of course, 127, which is huge and it's going to go up, that means that we will have a lot of work. We will have 12 calls in the same year. So let's start right now to help us, and we will help you in order to handle this. Another issue that needs to be mentioned is that it is important to be clear to you the capacity under which you can implement a project. More times than not, because of the restructuring, services are in a dilemma and they are not sure who has assumed cut. In the past, there was an issue during the transition period that one service thought it was responsible for something, but it wasn't. And we had a lot of movement of employees. Right now, you need to declare, to know exactly what you are allowed to do. For private agencies and NGOs, if they have their main obligations to participate in the registry of NGOs, there is no prioritization of an agency against another agency. You are impartially assessed, and the system has saw to it that there is no conflict of interest, and people that are assessing NGOs or private agencies, we see to it that these employees they do not represent an implementation agency themselves. So this is important to know. Impartiality is a key word for us. Needs for funding are numerous. Mrs. Gemante said that we had 3 billion awarded in the past, and now we have 2 extra ones. But there is an effort from various agencies to get more for their bodies. That we have available money, that doesn't mean that everything can be financed. The maturing proposals should be part of the program and support the general views of the Commission in migration. So we cannot support needs that are not directly linked to the objectives of this program. And you should know that beforehand. Well, with our proposals, we have tried to avoid that. Even though we see that there are other needs, we have clarified that this proposal should be substantial for the beneficiaries and will build something for the future. So we need to have a continuity of building things and for the future years. Since we had a financing gap and we had some funding humping in the past, we went from national programs to other kinds of funding. that might have led us to forget how the national program operates. So, cooperate with the managerial authority, ask it in order to avoid misunderstandings. So the managing authority is there to assist you to avoid faults and misunderstandings in now and in the future. Well, I might sound like a teacher and a very strict one, but I think that this is what we need to know. Well, substantial for the proposal is important to be realistic. We, in September, for example, we make haste to pay what has left. We will be able to find money if to cover the need, but we cannot overcharge the budgets, just feeling that okay, we will find a way to absorb and use the money. This is something else that I need to say. Well, as regards the institutional framework and the rest, during the implementation period, they will be included in the calls quite eloquently and in detail. We know from previous periods how to handle that, so we will be in detail in what we describe, so you cannot have an argument that I wasn't aware of something when you submit a proposal. The service is always there to help you, to assist you, or if you can't find any other executive, just call me to inform you. The last thing I want to mention is human rights. When we started the whole thing with human rights, personally, I was surprised from the persistence of the European Commission to talk about that, because in my mind, respect of human rights is something that we had as member states before our adhesion to EU, and it was a requirement for someone to be member of the EU, so we didn't understand this persistence. As we worked with our colleagues from Brussels and we discussed these issues, I remembered some cases of sexism I have experienced in my workplace. I remembered some colleagues that hesitated presenting themselves before a committee because of their sexual orientation. I thought of some people that work in a building, and since they were people with disabilities, they could, and there was no elevator, they were stuck in the ground floor without being able to communicate in person with other people of different floors. So these are human rights. And for me, now it's more clear that human rights is substantial in order to be able to offer better services to the citizens and to cooperate. So do cooperate with us and the respective services protecting the human rights in the ministries. That is what I wanted to say. I would like to thank the Commission for making us becoming better all the time. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Katrina Volfova to take the floor, and Mrs. Oprianos will follow.
Μπορείτε να ξεκινήσετε. Καλημέρα.
Hear me? Can you hear me well?
We can't hear you very clearly. Μπορείτε να ανεβάσετε τον ήχο.
Can't hear me. Yes. Many thanks. So good afternoon again, dear chair of the committee, dear deputy minister, dear authorities, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us to participate in the monitoring committee of the Home Affairs Funds for the period 2021-2027. I'm very pleased that I could attend this meeting remotely from Brussels, so thank you very much also for allowing this participation. I would like to congratulate and thank for all your efforts and the good cooperation throughout the process of the approval of the programs under the three funds for Greece for the period 21-27. We see the monitoring committee as a continuation of the work made so far. It is the right forum to follow and discuss the implementation of the programs through an active participation of all partners in the administration, beneficiaries, and the various stakeholders. We think that it should meet, it should meet at least once a year, but we believe that and strongly encourage that the meetings take place more often, given the high importance of its members' role aiming for successful implementation of the programs. The three Home Affairs programs are now part of the Common Provision Regulation family, something that comes with a big part of responsibility for the managing authority, the implementing partners, and as a result, the monitoring committee as well. The Common Provision Regulation foresees heavier procedures in terms of payments and reporting, and the role of the monitoring committee is therefore crucial in ensuring sound financial management by respecting the set deadlines and making sure the necessary documentation is submitted and approved on time. Moreover, the significant budget that is allocated to Greece for this new period necessitates a more thorough monitoring schedule of the projects throughout the implementation period, not only from the managing authority, but also from the members of this monitoring committee. We welcome very much the arrangements that are set up and established concerning the regular update on the fulfillment of the enabling conditions, with particular attention made to the respect of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The role of the monitoring committee is crucial in this respect in assessing the fulfillment of the all enabling conditions throughout the implementation period of the programs. In this context, the participation of the Greek Ombudsman and other fundamental rights bodies is considered key for the Home Affairs Funds. Regarding the partnership, the Common Provision Regulation, specifically Article 39, requires the active involvement of partners described in the respective programs, including, among others, international organizations, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, local and regional partners. So this requires their participation in the monitoring committee as members with voting rights. This requirement is of particular importance in order to ensure the programs are implemented in the most inclusive way. And we would strongly encourage Greece to involve these actors in the work of this committee through a transparent procedure, avoiding any conflict of interest. As representatives of the Commission in this forum, we look forward to our active participation in the work of the committee in our monitoring and advisory capacity. We stand at the disposal of the managing authority to support it in the preparation of the meetings, as well as in ensuring the follow-up of the decisions taken by the monitoring committees. Finally, we encourage the managing authority to continue with the good practices identified during the 2014-2020 programming period, as well as to build on any new recommendations that can be made in the context of the future monitoring committees, with a view to achieving the most effective possible implementation of the programs, hence the most effective use of EU funds. Thank you very much again, and I wish everyone a fruitful continuation of work, and we look forward for continuous good cooperation.
Ευχαριστούμε την κυρία Βόλφοβα για την επικοδομητική της παρέμβαση.
We'd like to thank Mrs. Volkova for her intervention. I'd like to say that the electronic system, Diavlos, in which all the members of the committee have access, they're already the minutes of the first meeting of the 16th of December of 2022 and the agenda of this second meeting of the committee. So we proceed to the last presentation of IDAP, the Greek police, Mr. Oprianos. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Deputy Minister, Secretary and Special Secretaries, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. I wish you Happy New Year and good luck to all of us with what we are involved in. Yep. If the app, the Authority for Managing European and National Program was introduced in 2011. And throughout this time, we have managed to tackle all issues. For the new programming period, we will be an intermediate body invited to manage parts of these three funds mentioned by the previous speakers. I will present the funds. The first with the border management and visa. The aim of this fund, as its title, to fund policies that have to do with the support of the management, efficient management of external borders of the EU. This is achieved via two specific objectives. The first, the integrated management of borders, and the second, of the joint visa standards for travelers entering our country. The budget of this fund is 383 million euros, which is allocated to the Greek police and the National Center for Border Management. Some indicative actions that will be funded by the previous amount of money had to do with personnel hiring and new contracts for the border guards that had temporary employment contracts, the automated supervision system that operates quite well in Evros region with Albania and North Macedonia. Other means some vehicles and vessels for lakes and rivers that are of paramount importance, and equipments for the protection of borders, thermal cameras, drones, some balloons with cameras, and also enhancement of passport control by the border police, coverage of operational needs of the police, and other actions that have to do with compliance according to the recommendations with regard to the Schengen system assessment. The second one, Internal Security Fund, as you can understand for the title, is responsible for the security of countries related to organized crime, cyber crimes, and other kinds of crimes, and of course offer assistance to victims of criminal actions. There are three specific targets, objectives in this. They have to do with exchange of information, transborder cooperation, and actions for prevention of crimes. The budget is 58 million euros, and the beneficiaries of this funding can be the headquarters of Port Police and the Hellenic Police, the National Authority for Transparency, the Directorate Combating Trafficking, the Directorate for the Mental Health of Children. So we will manage, the fund will manage 52 million euros. Other actions indicative of this fund include drug prevention and drug trafficking. The second one has to do the Criminal Directorate for fingerprints, upgrading the center of fingerprints taking, and some further training and education of the personnel, upgrading of the operational ability of the Transparency Authority, identification, prevention, and awareness raising, protection of victims of crimes, and a joint effort for the prevention of sexual harassment of children. The third fund, Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, the general objective is to support actions focusing on effective management of migration flows and integrated policy for asylum in compliance with international obligations, regulations of the country. The specific goal of return aims at dealing with illegal migration and safe relocation or return of beneficiaries. The beneficiaries is the Hellenic Police, the Ombudsman, and the health units included in this framework. Forced returns are some of the objectives, return operations of non-beneficiaries of international protection. The beneficiary, the Ombudsman, with the external monitoring system of forced returns and services offered in the pre-return centers. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, dear colleague, for your intervention, and now we'll give the floor to all those who would like to take the floor. Mr. Koutoulakis is one of them, and if there are any others wishing to do so, please take the floor. We'd like to thank the Deputy Minister, Mrs. Voltepsi. It was interesting, but we have some other things to do during this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank for the participation and the great cooperation for this result. We represent with Mr. Christophilis the Ministry of
Insular policy.
Of insular policy, and we are in charge of the most important issues as stated by the Prime Minister and the Minister, Mr. Mitarakis. What I would like to say is that our ministry, in cooperation with your services, which I want to congratulate, as well as the European Commission, in an open and direct dialogue and an impeccable cooperation for the design of this strategic plan, it has led to a comprehensive program for the renewal of the Coast Guard that need investment. We're talking about supplies which are hard, difficult, but which have shown great results after the previous programming period, and have upgraded the way in which the borders are secured and guarded. And of course, we focus on the protection of human lives in the sea, which are a bit more difficult and sensitive because you have to deal with the sea and non-human factors that contribute to a dangerous environment. This means that with the funding, we can increase the security of the staff, the workers there, and the security of our procedures, along with Frontex and the European Commission. We are there, and one of the most iconic actions we have already deposited for specialization is about the provision of vessels with healthcare equipment, because in these operations of rescue, and all the issues we face many times in incidents that unfortunately happen, we have men and women of the Coast Guard who are there to help and assist, and there are many interventions that already have worked successfully because we managed to accelerate the internal procedures. We're talking a lot about the tenders. We have a good pace so that we can make use of the resources, which are never enough, of course, but we have managed to use them properly. And I want to mention the effort that has been coordinated by you as well in terms of communications and the digitization of the way in which main policies are implemented. So we would like to thank you very much. We are the third partner of a scheme. Of course, we are not doing any managing job. We don't have any managing assignment, but you're doing a great job that brings great results. And I think that during the next period, which is already here, and we're happy that we are one of the first partners that will bring expenditures because of the actions we have already implemented. So I'd like to thank all of you. We see the results. We see how the resources from the European Commission and the Home Affairs Fund bring a great result. And I am here to talk about the insular policy, and the world must understand how these resources have made their life better of all these people, of the people of the island. So it is a great positive intervention to upgrade the capacity and the skills of the services. We are a service, this Coast Guard, along with Frontex, we are there to help in the Greek borders. And thank you very much for the impeccable cooperation. Thank you very much, Mr. Koutoulakis. What I keep is what you said, that, sometimes we're saying, we're talking about the bad things of our home, which is Europe, of course, and most rarely about the good things. So these funds, the Migration and Internal Affairs funds, are a proof of the European solidarity in the framework of the distribution of a budget for issues that we all face. And at least during this new programming period, it is worth saying the truth about the positive contribution of the of our European family, and do not only complain about the bad things. Is there anyone else who wants to take the? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. General Secretary. From the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, my name is Gaitani. I represent our General Secretary. We would like to thank you for the invitation and congratulate the Ministry of Migration and Asylum for its work until now. We work closely with you, which has helped us to achieve our common goals. We believe that the national program that has been submitted is perfect and can cover all the needs of all the involved bodies. I'd like to mention a few things about VIS, the IT system, a small project in comparison to all the other programs. A small part of our program, and I'd like to mention that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs we have a success story. Our IT system each year needs 800,000 euros in order to operate and brings 33 million euros to Greece from the embassy taxes for visas. During the COVID, Greece was the third country in the awarding of visas, which means that we have a great potential to enhance our tourism through this IT system, through VIS. So we would like to send this message to everybody that there is, of course, this issue for the migration management, but all of this has also a developmental aspect for all the bodies and for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we would like to ensure Frontex, that is represented today, that we will do our best to have a high quality of security of citizens' personal data that we handle through this, we process through these IT systems, VIS, ETIAS, which will be up and running in the next period. We will do our best to ensure that there is cybersecurity in our systems, and that we will cover, us and the other ministries, the Schengen recommendations, because this is our responsibility. At least it's our priority to cover all these needs, and we would like to ensure the European Commission that all these things will be covered through these major investments. Thank you very much. I know we're all in a rush, but okay, I will be very brief. Okay, just a quick comment. Since we're all here today live, I'd like to explain the role of the National Committee for the Human Rights. I'm here to represent the National Committee for Human Rights for the protection of and the promotion of the human rights in our country. I will not go into many details because they were very much explained by the representatives of the European Commission and Frontex. All these committees have an enhanced role in this programming period for the consultation, implementation and assessment of the use of the funding by the European funds. So we are here and will be operating individually and assisting with our expertise in the fulfillment of condition 3 for the compliance with the Charter of Human Rights. It's a new assignment given to us by the European Union and our country. And we are already working with the General Secretary of Investment and Development as far as the compliance with the Charter is concerned. And we're also working with the General Secretary of Migration Policy. And we have several proposals that we will submit to them to enhance. Of course, there have been many efforts for these guarantees, but we are always trying to be better. So we're here to contribute and help. Thank you. And you're very kind, and thank you for your contribution. We will have the opportunity with the president and whoever wants, along with our General Secretary, to meet and discuss several issues, some technical issues, and see how we can improve our cooperation at all levels. Is there anyone else? I'd like to say to Mrs. Agliotti from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that not only we haven't forgotten you, but there is an obligation of the fund to have 10% of its budget for the visa issues. So this is also a case for the BMVI, and this arises from the regulations, and we must be all together. All the member states must have a common policy for the visas, and during this programming period, we will have the chance to implement this and fulfill this condition, this requirement. So not only we haven't forgotten you, we also depend on you to help us on this aspect.
Ηλεκτρονική πλατφόρμα εδώ υπάρχει κάποιο.
So from our electronic platform, is there anyone who wants to comment? So after the approval of the decisions that we make today, you all must know that these decisions will be uploaded to the website of the competent authority. You all know which authority is this. And the platform, Diavlos. I have two options in front of me. I will go for the second. The final text with any comments that you may send will be sent for approval by the members within the next 5 working days, because I believe that in this committee, apart from the second meeting we had, apart from the first meeting, this second meeting will make decisions that will bind the managing authority and the country's policy in this issue for the next 7 years. So I would prefer that you read carefully the decisions and the text so that we can do our best. For all of you who know me, you know that I do this very rarely, but For this case, I think this is the best way in order to have the best results. I'd like to thank Mrs. Gminde for being here today during the whole duration of the event and the meeting of the committee, all of you for your presence. And next time, the next committee that I plan to do before the elections, I plan to organize it before the elections, we will be in a more special place in our ministry. We have a beautiful amphitheater and it will be very nice. So thank you very much.